think we have some house cleaning to do because we're into December now. That means hurricane season is done, and it was a busy one. Meteorologist Zack Webster takes a look back.
The 2024 Atlantic hurricane season was another active hurricane season that featured 5 different storms that made landfall in the United States, each of them hurricanes and each of them in the Gulf of Mexico as well. Hurricane Beryl, Hurricane Debbie, Hurricane Francine, Hurricane Helene, and Hurricane Milton all made landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast throughout the Atlantic hurricane season. The first of those, Hurricane Beryl, was a Category 1 when it made landfall along the central portions of Texas, but much earlier in its life out across the central portions of the Caribbean, it became the earliest Category 5 storm in the history of the Atlantic hurricane basin. Max sustained winds of 80 miles per hour when it made landfall on the morning of July 8th. Mostly storm surge flooding occurring right along the Texas coast. Then we had Hurricane Debbie, also a Category 1 when it made landfall. Its primary impact was notable flooding that happened across portions of Georgia, South Carolina, and continuing northward into North Carolina. You notice how much Debbie slowed down right off the coast of South Carolina. That caused quite a bit of flooding for portions of Georgia and into the Carolinas. Then we had Hurricane Francine, a slightly stronger hurricane, Category 2 at landfall. Max sustained winds of 100 miles per hour when it made landfall on September 11th. There was significant damage right along the Louisiana coast with both damaging winds and flooding damage as well. Many locations that were impacted by Francine were also impacted by Hurricane Ida back in 2021. Our strongest hurricane was Hurricane Helene, 140 miles per hour when it made landfall along the Big Bend of Florida on September 26th. Again, the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the United States. In addition to significant wind damage along the Gulf Coast, it's probably most known for the prolific flooding, the significant flooding that happened in the mountains of North Carolina. The final of those hurricanes, Hurricane Milton, a Category 3 hurricane when it made landfall, but it quickly strengthened from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane farther back out over the Gulf of Mexico. It is most known for being a prolific tornado producer across portions of the Florida Peninsula. Close to 40 tornadoes were produced. That included an EF3 that moved near Palm Beach Gardens, Florida.
What a season it was. Hurricane season in the books. We'll look forward to the next one in about 6 months, and we'll enjoy the off season for sure.